In this video, we'll discuss the idea of the semi-bluff. What is a semi-bluff? Well, it's a bet, of course, from behind, meaning you figure to have the worst hand at the moment against your opponent. But you have equity. It's a bet from behind with equity, meaning you have a chance, if you hit the right card or cards, to improve to be the best hands. In other words, you have outs. So why do people semi-bluff? Well, there are two good reasons. Because you can win the hand two ways. You can either win the bluff component, meaning your opponent folds. Usually you semi-bluff the flop, so your opponent, if he folds on the flop, you win right there, whatever the size of the pot is. If he calls, though, normally with a regular bluff, that's failure. But when he calls your semi-bluff, you actually might hit one of your outs. And that's the second way to win. And because there's two ways to win, it's superior to a plain bluff. Let's work through a hand example to see the mechanics of the semi-bluff. Let's say you have Queen-Jack suited, spades, Queen of spades, Jack of spades, and you're on the button. You're facing an opponent who has Ace of hearts, 10 of hearts in late middle position. It's a heads up pot, and the flop is King of clubs, 10 of spades, 2 of spades. Now, you have a monster hand, but you have nothing. You have a combo draw, as we say. You have a spade draw for the flush, and you have an open-ended straight draw with 8 additional outs. In fact, any queen or jack on the turn, assuming your opponent doesn't improve, would also give you the best hand. You actually have 20 outs out of 45 unseen cards for 44% equity in the hand. So it's almost a value bet, actually. But it's a bluff since you're not the favorite. It's less than 50% chance for you to win this hand. So if you bet this flop, it's called a semi-bluff because your opponent's actually ahead at the moment. He's got a pair of 10s. And if you're betting here, it can't be a value bet. It's a bluff because you're hoping to fold a better hand. That's the bluff part. But if he does call, it's okay because if we hit a 9, an ace, a queen, a jack, or a spade, we'll improve to be the better hand. So we have this safety net, if you will. There are a lot of other good things about semi-bluffing that might not be readily apparent to you. Let's discuss them now. The first is that your opponent doesn't get a free turn card. Without being taught the semi-bluff, you might think it's best just to check behind. Say he checks to you on this flop. You say, oh, I'll check behind because then I increase my chances of seeing the turn myself and perhaps hitting one of my outs. Think about it, though, from an offensive perspective. If you make a semi-bluff, then you keep your opponent from maybe turning that third 10. Another reason it's a great move is you essentially will get to see a free river card. And what does that mean? It means if he checks to you on the flop and you check back, he's gonna bet into you on the turn, which means you're gonna have to pay to see the river. But if you semi-bluff, if you bet the flop and he calls that, he's very unlikely to lead into you on the turn, which means you can then you have the option of checking back on the turn and seeing the river for free. And you might say, well, you're still behind one bet either way, whether you semi-bluff the flop and get to see the river for free on the turn, or you check the flop and then you're forced to call a bet on the turn. And you're right. In each situation, you're losing one bet. But with the semi-bluff, you also have that fold equity, the chances that he folds on the flop. So you're getting a little bonus while seeing the free river, quote unquote. Another reason the semi-bluff is powerful is it's misleading. In our hand example, if you bet in position on this flop, your opponent's going to think at least a big part of your range is top pair, meaning you have some king. Think of how disastrous this will be for him if the turn comes, say, an ace, and you complete your straight, he has two pair, and he thinks he's up against your former top pair. Finally, the semi-bluff is an opportunity to get extra info. Say you execute the semi-bluff in this situation, but you get check raised by your opponent. Now, that's bad news on the surface, but it allows you to get away from a hand where you might be crushed early. Say your opponent actually had, instead of ace 10, let's say he had a set of kings, or maybe even a set of tens. This lets you either fold or start doing the calculations of your pot odds versus your hand equity to see if getting committed and all in on this hand is worth it. If pot odds and equity don't make sense to you, be sure to watch our couple videos on the subject. As you semi-bluff more and more, your opponent is going to start reacting to it. Meaning he's going to be playing level 2 poker, not thinking just about level 1, what cards he has, but he's going to start thinking about what cards you have. And if you semi-bluff your draws a lot, he's going to notice that you don't have a made hand when the board is coordinated, meaning there's either a straight or a flush draw. This means you need to adapt. You need to step your game up to level 3, thinking about what your opponent thinks you have. And that means as you get better at playing poker, you actually need to change the way in which you use the semi-bluff. You need to decrease the frequency with which you use it on flush draws. This is going to be the most obvious opportunity to semi-bluff, and even your average opponents are going to get hip to what you're doing pretty fast. As you decrease that frequency, though, you can start semi-bluffing more on double gut shot straight draws. You can call them double gutters, meaning you have two separate straight draws, two separate gut shot straight draws, meaning you effectively have 8 outs, which is the same number of outs as an open-ended straight draw, and only one less out than a flush draw. You could also semi-bluff on a single gut shot as long as you have overcards, we'll say overs, or backdoor BD flush equity, meaning you have three cards to a flush currently, and if you hit runner, you'll get the flush. So the overcards might add up to 6 outs in addition to your 4 in the gut shot straight, plus your backdoor equity. And the great thing about these gut shot straight draws is they're disguised. It's hard to tell. The flop's uncoordinated, and your opponent is there's virtually a 0% chance that they're actually going to pick up on the fact that you have a gut shot. They're more likely going to think that you're betting with top pair. So that's how you would change your semi-bluff strategy as your opponent starts to adapt to you. But remember, the whole reason the semi-bluff works is because your opponent mistakes it for a value bet where you have something like top pair and over pair to the board. So you also can start changing your value bet behavior as your opponent gets hip to the fact that you know what the semi-bluff is. What we recommend here is that you start over-betting the pot when you have top pair, top kicker, or an over pair, or some monster like a set. And particularly do it on wet flops, coordinated flops, that your opponent will be suspicious you're semi-bluffing a draw on. This way you can start extracting more value from your true value bets as your opponent starts becoming suspicious that you're semi-bluffing draws.